Barack Obama breaking barriers and making history as the first African-American to be elected president. It is vindication for those who helped spark the civil rights movement. Joining me from Newton, Massachusetts, is Charles Ogletree, professor at Harvard Law School. He was a professor to Barack and Michelle Obama at Harvard. Also, the Reverend Eugene Rivers, who was cheering on there as we... He's a pastor at Azusa Christian Community Church and an MSNBC analyst, and Maria Teresa Peterson, founding executive director of Voto Latino. Great to have all of you. Professor, I will start with you there at Harvard, because you taught Michelle and Barack Obama. Must be amazing to have watched last night and see those two clips together, too, of Barack Obama and the Reverend Martin Luther King.
Absolutely. I met Michelle 23 years ago and Barack 20 years ago when they both were students here at different times. Been a senior mentor and a senior advisor to the campaign, and it is just a remarkable thing to see my grandchildren telling me this morning Barack Obama's president, and seeing 70 and 80 and 90-year-old grandmothers telling me how long they waited in line to vote for him. So it is a historic moment. It's not a Dr. King moment. That's a different part of our history, but it's an important moment for all of America to see what's happened the elections last night. I'm very pleased. Very tired, but very pleased.
There's a lot of tired people who just cannot take their eyeballs off the TV screen, and that is a good thing, because it's history in the making. And Reverend Rivers, I want to get your sense of that, about what this too means, you know, for many Americans who watched history in the making sort of last night, and for young Americans.
I think for young Americans, this means that this is the nation of possibilities and promise. I mean, it's amazing. We see Obama lifting some of the homiletic poetry from King's message, and it's extraordinary. I mean, in addition to being a brilliant politician, he's a good preacher. Yeah. And so I think that for an entire generation of young people, faith and hope was resurrected. For kids that live in the inner cities that are trapped, he really provided the basis for believing that anything is possible in this country. It's amazing. You know,
I was struck, because I was down in our election plaza at Rockefeller Center, how many people just stood there staring up at our TV screens, listening intently. I've never seen a collective sense of the American public watching something so intently. Yeah. People nodding their heads, crying, preaching, as you say, but I mean the sense that you listen to a preacher in that way, wanting to believe and everything like that. Maria, we talked about the Hispanic vote. Obama winning that 2-1. George W. Bush did well among Hispanics in 2004. Well. John McCain did not replicate that this year.
Well, and I think this was, this was a watershed moment for Latino politics everywhere. And it was a personal vote because of all the anti-immigration sentiment and rhetoric that people have been feeling. Folks went to the polls. I mean, my grandmother voted for the first time last night, as did my 25-year-old cousin. So it's cross-generational. And what we're finding, too, is that they basically helped open up the pathway for Obama, because they were the critical vote in Colorado, in Florida, in Virginia, also New Mexico, all demographic changes that were not in play back when Bush won the White House in 2004. Because we're talking about millions of new voters coming into the polls every 4 years, not hundreds.
Yeah, and Obama's campaign was smart about capturing those new demographics out in the West. Professor Ogletree, because you taught them and knew them when they were young in law school, I wonder what you might say about their, and I apologize, we just lost his shot, but maybe Reverend Rivers, about Barack Obama's temperament. And I ask that because there are huge challenges now that this country is facing. We have a wartime transition. We have a country with the most difficult transition perhaps since the Great Depression on an economic front.
You know, what's remarkable to me, as I listened to the speech, is there were two figures, historical figures, that came to mind. Number one, I thought of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, because Roosevelt was a cool operator. He was a very cool patrician, right? And Obama's got a whole nother kind of cool, right? So you've got the cool on the one hand that's very contemplative and deliberative, right? Then he had that homiletic poetry with that preaching rhythm going, right? Yeah. So you've got this amazing synthesis of FDR and Martin Luther King, right? With a little hip-hop on it, right? That's a touch of hip-hop, right? Very smooth.
I love it. I love it. Well, Reverend Rivers, you are fantastic. Maria Teresa Peterson and Professor Ogletree as well. A wonderful panel. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And that does it for me. My colleague Andrea Mitchell is coming up next. She's going to be talking to Congressman Jim Clyburn, a veteran of the civil rights movement, about this historic election. Now, you are watching MSNBC. It is the place for politics.